Hello, and welcome to the Million Kids Podcast, Protect and Prevent. This is brought to you by millionkids.org. We are an organization out of Southern California that our motto is keeping kids safe from predators. We've been doing it about 15 years. And we talk about all kinds of things on this podcast, things like sextortion and social media exploitation, blackmail, financial sextortion, all kinds of things that our kids get into. But today I want to talk to you about something that's really, really very heavy. And I have to give this a lot of thought before I agreed to do this, quite frankly. But I do believe it is absolutely important. So before I get started, I want to tell you that you might want to go to millionkids.org and sign up for our newsletter. It is free. We don't sell your name, and it is probably the very best in the business about keeping you informed on how to keep our kids safe from predators. So I hope you will do that. Well, we often talk about things like sex trafficking or online exploitation. Today, I want to talk about the power of inclusion and how terrorist groups radicalize teens online. Now, I'm going to warn you, this is a tough subject to talk about. But it all started for me this last week because we got a news headline that came out, all about a case where an individual, 19-year-old Tyson Proper was his last name. Interesting last name, I thought. Anyways, from Ohio. He's an adult. He's 19 years old. And he is currently being charged in connection with an alleged plot targeting the UFC event at the White House grounds. Now, if you're naive like me and you wonder what UFC stands for, that's the Ultimate Fighting Championships that were held at the White House lawn. And what happened here is that this young man named Tyson Proper, 19 years old from Ohio, his mother turned him in. And that's what got my attention. You know, I don't know the lady, don't know anything about her, but I say to myself, to turn your son in as a potential terrorist had to take guts and a conscience unlike most people have. And I applaud her because I know she has a love for her son, but she probably kept him out of prison for life and also probably saved many, many lives. That's a huge event, and a lot of people would have been there. So let me give you a little background, and then we're going to talk about how all of this works as far as how terrorist groups or nihilistic groups, groups like 764 or the Calm or people like that, how they radicalize teens online. So let's look at the crime first of all. Authorities reviewed Tyson Proper's phone after the mother called him. Turned him in. And I'm looking at the article. It said the mother saw him researching locations near Washington, D.C., and receiving maps and images through text messages and Discord. When the authorities went in and started checking his phone, they saw Signal chats. Now, Signal is a well-known encrypted app. And so it's very hard often to get evidence out of there, but it is also a huge indicator. If your child is on one of those encrypted apps, you need to stop in your tracks and start thinking differently than maybe you would normally think about your child. Now, it's possible that in the future we'll all be encrypted apps, but that is not true today. Encrypted apps are used mostly by underground groups. And what was happening, the mother realized, is they were discussing plans for an attack on this fighting event, and they were using explosive-laden drones and shooters positioned near evacuation routes. This is not a small crime we're talking about here. And mom must have had a couple of sleepless nights, and also probably dad. You know, what do you do? Can you talk him out of it? Is this real? Could this possibly be your son doing this? How did this happen? How did you go from a normal son to someone who is gathering up explosives laden drones and charting out an evacuation route. How does that happen? So as they began to understand what happened and the mother contacted law enforcement, they realized investigators later uncovered the encrypted messaging and the attack planning. So mom apparently tried to take it on herself, and I get that. Every one of us would do whatever we could to protect our child. Unless you realize that your child is about to do something that is going to harm a lot of other people and make him a permanent criminal. She confronted him and said the group planned to conduct recon and hit and run missions, so he's lying, okay? She thought maybe he's talking about planned shootings. The mother contacted authorities on June 10th, and this event, by the way, was June 14th. I looked that up to see how much time authorities had to work with this information. Now, it looks like to me the authorities took this very seriously, and I'm very proud of that because, you know, these authorities, they are getting a lot of leads about all kinds of illegal online activity. You know, those of you who follow me normally know that in 2025, National Center for Missing Exploited Children took in more than 21 million reports of potential online child exploitation. That's something like almost 60,000 a day. And no investigative agency in the whole wide world is capable of processing and investigating that level of crime on a daily basis. But somehow she got through to them and she got the information and they stopped everything and began to look at it. So as she began to look at it, one of the things that they realized is that Tyson had bought an AR style rifle and a bullpup rifle, I don't know what that is, but it's some sort of rifle, was painted with an American flag. Well, I saw the picture of it. It's pretty, by the way, if you're into guns, you know, but it's not pretty if you're on the receiving end of those bullets. And so he had bought that. The family was probably rationalizing that he's just a little overzealous with his gun ownership. But I do want to bring that up. I am not against guns. I'm not. I think that young people need to know how to use them and protect themselves and the average person. However, I also believe that if you have teenagers in the house, and yes, he's 19, so he's not a child. I give you that. But if you have teenagers in your house that are online, lock those babies up and put away the key. Now, he is, in essence, an adult. He's 19, and he had bought this, so the parents probably couldn't do that. But it must have really got their attention, thank God, because she realizes that he's in talking to some sort of extremist groups in an encrypted environment, and he's buying up these drones, and now he's buying an AR-style rifle. She must have had some sleepless nights in that case. Well, it turns out he's part of a group that is planning the attack on June 14th. The alleged plot involved explosive-laden drones, a sniper position, and coordinated attacks on attendees and other targets. Just to imagine how many people could have been killed. She noticed her son's growing obsession with the guns and the tactical gear and the secretive online communications. Now, as I've done all the research on this, I've combined several articles, and I do want to thank the people that took the time to research all these articles. The links to these articles are on our website for what it's worth. And so what happened here is that Tyson is not the only person in this group. This is a terrorist group. Groups of radicalized young people coming together all over the world. So they moved their communication to the encrypted chat, and they were looking at forcing high-value targets to evacuate the premise. That would be somebody, maybe like the president or vice president, maybe. I'm speculating. We don't know that. The group would then act as snipers and shoot those individuals. Before executing the plan, this young man and other people that he's talking to planned to rendezvous in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So he put together a group of firearms, thousands of rounds of ammunition and tactical gear in his home in Ohio, and he had already identified potential targets, including multiple members of Congress. According to the complaint filed in the Central District of California, law enforcement executed a search warrant of another individual. So we have the names in these articles of some of the other individuals. One of them is, and I have these individual names somewhere in all this research. It's like a foot high, okay? But one of them is here from California. His name was Roa, okay? And he's from maybe 30, 40 miles from where I live in this case. And so what happened is they filed a complaint in California. Keep in mind this person that first talking about here, can't come up with his name. What was it? Proper. He's from Ohio. This guy is from California. His name is Roa, R-O-A. They got a search warrant based on this information, and giving them at least 3 days, they really went after the investigation. I'm very, very proud of them. When they got to Roa's residence, they seized his vehicle. They executed a search warrant, and they seized a rifle and a handgun, tactical belt, ammunition, a rifle magazine, a two-way radio, infrared laser target pointer. They also found messages in there between other people, including Proper and Thomas and others that were discussing the attack. They allegedly found Instagram videos that Roa had posted with the guns. His father told police that Proper had recently met people online, had been planning recons, planning to leave over the weekend to meet them. He allegedly spent $3,000 of his graduation money to purchase equipment, including firearms and camping gear. Okay, so here's the deal. These people were playing for keeps. They were looking out to take out a lot of people's lives. And I want to just work with you a little bit to help you understand how could this possibly happen. And, some of what the mother and dad are grappling with today. And that is why I call this the power of inclusion and the terrorist groups radicalize teens online. I don't know this individual named Tyson Proper. I don't at all. But I do know that pretty much there are several factors in how these groups come together. One of the things that Million Kids has been doing for many, many years now is reading all of these articles with the idea of looking at them, and as a team, we analyze them to say, how can we say never again? How do we prevent a young person from being radicalized by one of these groups? Or how can we help parents understand very, very quickly that their child may be being groomed and radicalized so that they can intervene and it doesn't get to this level? So I applaud Mrs. Proper, if that's her last name, the mother of this young man, for doing what she did. But what I hope to do with you is help you understand how this works. Now, this is not an easy subject because none of us really wants to look at radicalization and terrorism and these extreme torture groups. I mean, it is really bad news to look at this stuff. But if you're going to, let's use the information in a way that we can train each other to stop it early. So some of the factors have to do with the way technology has developed over the past 4 or 5 years. And the reason for that, I wrote a book called Digital Warfare, Our Kids on the Front Line. And we do talk about the group 764. That's a nihilistic group. We mentioned briefly the CALM. All of these are groups that are what they call nihilistic extremist groups. And they go in and they really use video gaming to access, groom, recruit, and use our kids to exploit other people. In the meantime, they get exploited also. So the way this works is this is possible, and it's a somewhat new phenomena because of the technology developed over the last 3 or 4 years. The first one is the fact that we are now a globally connected world. That means that when your teenager, hopefully not your prepubescent child, but when your teenager goes online, they're on there with 5.5 billion people. And most of them are nice people, but a lot of them are really bad criminal groups that can now reach your child, your young person, your teenager on demand at any given time. This has never been possible before this time. And that is because now 70% of the world is connected by 5G high speed internet. At the same time, we have apps that are encrypted. So that means you, mom and dad, if your child's using an encrypted app, I would ask a whole lot of questions. I would be sitting by their side, seeing what they're doing. Now, that may change in the future, and I'm willing to change with it if it does. But right now, it is mostly those people that do not want to be investigated by law enforcement or sending nudes or doing some sort of exploitation online that are using the encryption. Now, that doesn't mean banks don't and people like that, but for the most part, I'd pay attention. We now have open AI, we have artificial intelligence. That is important for you to understand in the role here. Artificial intelligence means they can create all kinds of deep fakes and blackmail people, including your child, by the way. And so artificial intelligence, they can blackmail you. They can put out a nude image. They can put out a violent image. They can put out an extremist image. They can put out a satanic image. Okay, they can modify the look of their home. They can modify your image online, by the way. They also can modify the voices using AI, so it can sound like anybody. They can use AI to create profiles. I talked about this last week on the podcast. If you ask any young person, you be careful online, they'll go, oh, mom, I'm okay. I only talk to people I know or people who know me. Well, that's exactly how it works. Artificial intelligence, any terrorist group in the world can look like somebody that knows your child because they run the profile. And by the way, they go after the kids with the biggest profile. So that means they go after the kids that are most easy to recruit or most well known. At the same time, we have open AI, and not too many parents really understand what I'm saying when I say that. Open AI is basically let's say it's a resource bank. It's a way for computer programmers, for game developers to access all the things they need to create a game. So this is important to understand that games like Roblox, you may buy a Roblox game for your little kid, you know, and you play the game with him and you go, oh, this is all good. I don't see any problem. The kid's okay. Only 1 out of 8 Roblox games are developed by a Roblox developer. Anybody in the world can create Minecraft games, Roblox games, games on all the platforms. And they can be violent, they can be satanic, they can be nihilistic, they can be extremist in many, many ways. And this is exactly what is happening. So radical groups all across different spectrums will use a variety of communication interactions. They might meet your young person on a video game or connect on a platform like TikTok or X, and they will start to befriend your young person. They might meet on Discord or Telegram. That's not so much moderated on there, and where others don't track their activity. So this can be a group like 764, can be an extremist group like our Mr. Prosper here, with Proper here. Not Prosper, Proper. Let's get his name right. Anyway, you can meet anybody and everybody on one of those games. And what will happen here is they will have a profile of how they approach your child. So your kid most likely has some sort of long history in playing what are called MMORPGs. I probably should remember exactly what multi role playing games. I remember that on there. Yeah, massive multiplayer online role playing games. So, what happens is your young person has been playing those for a long time, even before you learn the word MMORPGs. Okay. So, they're on there in these games. And many of these games have a huge amount of sexuality and a huge amount of extremism. And so, they think nothing of it. If you ask a kid, in fact, I had a lot of fun one time in a youth group at a church. That 25% of the youth group told me sin on the internet is not sin because it's not real. I hope that works out for them. Okay. I question that. But you get what they're thinking is that they're out there and saying, well, it's just a game. It's not real. And so they're already out there playing these kinds of games. And so they will begin to profile. I have a note here I want to bring up here in a minute. They will begin to profile a certain kind of kid that they're looking for. A kid that is maybe lonely, a kid that maybe doesn't fit in, a kid that is easily talked to and manipulated, and they will begin to include that young person. They're looking for somebody who's lonely. Maybe they're a little bit unhappy. Maybe they're someone that doesn't fit in. Maybe they're autistic and they really can't understand all that is happening to them. And so, what will happen here is that the young person is stimulated. He's excited because for the first time, somebody accepts him for what he's at. So it'll be somebody who's playing in those games. And we cannot overemphasize the power of inclusion in these factors. So many of these kids that are lonely, suddenly they are accepted. Somebody cares about them. They belong. They believe they're valued and admired. And they'll work with their new friends to engage in a cause bigger than themselves because they're getting all these attaboys and, they're having a lot of fun and they have found acceptance. I think that I want to take a minute and share with you that this is exactly what all of these nihilistic and extremist groups understand. By the way, so do pedophiles when they're trying to get a nude from your child. They understand the value of inclusion and creating for that young person an environment of acceptance. So they create an environment where they can share any of their perceived wrongs, their delusions, and that person is a listening ear. Your young person begins to feel empowered and a sense of involvement and being able to contribute. They may think that suddenly they're empowered to change a political environment that they don't agree with. So for the first time, they'll believe that someone understands them. That once they're accepted in the group, though, they up the ante. The predator will rapidly engage the teen in building an identity, a new identity that may be militant and takes on extremist thinking. So, mom and dad, one of the things I really want you to think about in this is watch your child for behavior changes. They will start out suddenly, but if you see them, I'm going to suggest to you that one, you may want to shorten their time online. Two, whatever time they have online, you're going to be included. You're going to play the game, even if you don't know how to play the game. And you're going to start to find out really what's going on. It is really important to get there first, okay? Now, I don't believe that your kid's going to do this with open arms. You're going to have to take the reins here. But sooner or later, if your child is taking that avenue, you're going to have to take the reins anyway. So do it sooner than later so that your child does not end up in some sort of criminal behavior that will not only change their life forever, but could change many other people. So this kid's accepted in a group. They're exposed to continuous nihilistic or terrorist thinking and activity. This is not immediate. It's subtle. They'll begin to take on the little things here and there. They'll start to make humor out of harming animals or make humor out of nudity. That kid begins to be included. They don't want to be the oddball. Okay. They may be positioned as a leader for them, but they're constantly reminded that it's now us against everybody else that's out there. It's we're together on this, and we're against the establishment. Over time, your young person will redefine their thinking on this, and they'll redefine their own self-image. Now, suddenly, a cult or a terrorist group is their family. And they will start to do things that you can't believe are really happening. They're extreme. If you try to take them away, they may become violent. They may threaten things. They may close their door. You don't understand me. Leave me alone. You're not allowed to get in here. In this case, he's 19 years old and he's in their home and he's doing this kind of thing. The cult or terrorist group is now their family, and they're committed to conducting extreme measures, and it becomes an obsession. The minor may be induced to commit self-harm, such as cutting or self-mutilation. If you see a minor in your life that is self-mutilating or self-harming, immediately stop everything. If you're not their parent, get to their parent and say, this is a sign of extremism. It's a sign of terrorism. It's also a sign that that young person needs help. If that self-mutilation is numbers or letters, you need to involve law enforcement, because what is happening is they're being inducted into a terrorist group such as Group 764, which if you haven't heard that, when this podcast is over, go look it up. The group will glorify violence and harming self and others. So this happens because of the fact that the young person is now part of a game. And I'm not saying all games are bad. Okay, I'm not saying that by any means. There are some good games out there. But I'm going to tell you that if you are buying a game for your child and putting it on there, I would suggest that someone in your family know how to play that game with them and can start to fight for your kid's soul. Because some of those games are extremely sexual and extremely violent, and your child will slowly but surely be sucked into it. They won't even realize. It's a little bit like people who get severely addicted to pornography, and they have to have more and more difficult pornography and more harmful pornography, and it reaches outrageous proportions. And like that, and especially if they're addicted to child pornography, so many people, once they've gotten into it, they are sucked in deep, because you are dealing with pure evil. You are dealing with violence in ways that you cannot even imagine. So we're coming to the end of the podcast, but I want to kind of take us back out of this, because this has been heavy duty stuff. Okay. First of all, this young man had reached a point that if his mother did not go to law enforcement, nothing probably would have stopped him. He had been groomed, indoctrinated, and was deep in. The purpose of this particular podcast is not to scare you, not to, make everybody a terrorist group or make every kid who plays a game involved in it. No. What I want parents to understand is once your child begins to get in worlds that you no longer are involved in, like Discord or some of these apps that are encrypted, or in situations where they're talking to people that may not share your values, their behavior will begin to change. Pay attention to that. Catch it immediately if you can. Get online and see what they're seeing. Have the conversation with it. No more than you would allow them to go in and look at hardcore uh, pornography or bestiality. Hopefully, you're that kind of parent. You don't want them involved in this kind of online violent gaming. And I highly recommend that right early on, because once it starts down that path, get it before they have too much control of your child's mind. Now, if you have a situation like this at home, I highly recommend you get in there, understand what you're dealing with, assess it, and I hope you will be brave like this. And if you have a child that's going to do harm to somebody else, law enforcement needs to know. Even though it's the hardest thing you ever did, you are not a bad parent. You are a good parent and a good citizen. But what I'm really hoping for here is this will catch a lot of young people before they can ever be so indoctrinated. We're all going to stumble across this kind of extremism somewhere in our life. And, we need to nip that in the bud early on. One of the things I think is the most important thing that you can do as a family is any time before your child spends much time online, I hope that you will sit down with them and get them to define their values. Write out who you are as a person, write out who we are as a family, and talk about what it looks like if you're about to be groomed. Because your child is now online with 5.5 billion people. It is guaranteed they're going to run into it. And it will be at a time when they least expect it. They're going to believe, oh, mom, I'm going to know. But we need to talk to kids to let them know that that criteria no longer works. If you're connecting with somebody who's your friend and they're trying to include you in any kind of sexuality, exchanging of images, whether they're animal images or real life images, they are not your friend. And they are not going to help your online digital reputation. Sit down as individuals and as families and get people to write down in your family, no matter how young, what you believe, what you stand for. Because a young person who knows who they are and they set their goals are not going to succumb to this. But you get these kids that are loners, that are isolated, they don't fit in, and you add to that to put them in encrypted communication and these violent kind of sexual and violent gaming. And you have a recipe for a young person who's going to take their life down the wrong road. And they may very well try to take other people with them. I hope we get there first, mom and dad. So my name is Opal Singleton. This podcast is called Protect and Prevent. I hope you will go to millionkids.org and sign up. You are also free to write to me at Opal, OPAL, at millionkids.org, not .com, .org, Opal at millionkids.org. Now, I am not 911, okay? If you think that you have a situation and you want to report it, go to your local law enforcement and ask for cyber crimes. However, if you want to report something online, I'm going to give you the FBI reporting number, and that is 1-800-THE-LOST, 1-800-843-5678, 1-800-843-5678. That is the FBI number. I believe you can report anonymously, but I'm not really certain of that. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. Now, everybody who's listened, I'm going to remind you, this has been a tough subject. I don't do these lightly because I know they can be very difficult to hear. So I want you to self-care today, okay? After you've heard this, go out for a walk, have an ice cream cone, pet the dog, and look at your self-talk. Make sure it's positive and reinforcing, that you find the good in yourself and others so that it won't harm you in any way. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting Million Kids financially. Those of you that support us, you can do that by going to millionkids.org and signing up and hitting that. You don't have to sign up, just hit that donate button and send us money. We can't do this work without you. Thank you for listening. My name is Opal Singleton at Million Kids, and I'll see you on the next podcast.